Ambika, the connection's a little bit off, I think, from your side, or it might be just me.
Did you guys hear me? You're all frozen.
It's a little bit frozen. It cuts in and out.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if it was the same for others. I'm just gonna, well, I'll just listen in until, I know Ricken froze on my screen. So I was like, is Ricken listening attentively or is he actually frozen? But I just see Paul's head nodding, so I'm not sure.
Okay, it might be my side. So Ambika, I guess what I heard you were saying was that you have, like, after your trainings, you have some sort of round robin where you go around and there's self-acknowledgement, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, so is this any better, Ricken? Can you set the camera off?
We can hear you perfect.
Okay, perfect. So it actually is at the start of the weekly training sessions, literally 5 minutes across the room, people sharing one thing you're grateful for is the weekly standard. Once a while, we'll actually have people then do self-acknowledgement, like what do you want to acknowledge yourself for as a coach, as an accountability coach. And then at the end of each program, it's basically going around the cohort of that specific program where coaches acknowledge each other for what they've done great. And what I've experienced personally is we can actually often be really stingy with self-acknowledgement or self-appreciation because we're so hardwired to look at where we didn't perform. And in that exercise where you get to hear your acknowledgement from your peers at the end of a program, which is typically 3 months long, 12 weeks long, it's extraordinary because you will hear generosity and people's greatness being spoken of that actually we rarely have the capacity to do for our own selves. And so I feel appreciation, self-acknowledgement, or just acknowledgement for peers, or whether it's employees or fellow leaders or just the training structures is critical and a game changer in creating connectedness, but also for people to get related to their own greatness.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And it's great that you have something in place like that. One thing that I was thinking about when, this idea of like just having regular appreciation is that I think sometimes there could be the risk of it could sometimes being not, I guess maybe I'll use the word artificial, because if it has to be done on a regular basis versus, it coming from a genuine space within us. I think that's also something that I often think about when giving appreciation is, is it something that I'm inspired to do versus is it kind of just like part of a, something that becomes like mechanical. And I guess I wondered, has anyone ever experienced that in just when they lead groups of people of appreciation ever becoming like a thing that they must do rather than like versus something that they just do when they feel inspired to do so?
I think I'm more in the second category in terms of expressing appreciation when it feels good. So I do like from this passage the when leaders feel parental towards their constituents, then sacrifice comes easily. So, and I do feel sort of responsible for my team, and I often try to make decisions and point them in directions that I see where they are more competent than they themselves see themselves. So I did like that part of this quite a bit. The part that gets me though is the employing ministers and
Paul, sorry for interruption. I'm not you well. If you can please loud your voice.
Sure. Hold on a second. Let me just turn up my audio.
Yeah, I can't hear you that well, Paul, either.
Is this better?
Much better.
Excellent. I just turned up the volume on my mic.
Thank you. Can you just, do you mind just starting again?
No, not a problem. Thank you for asking, Hiba. I like the passage that talks about when leaders feel parental towards their constituents. I know that, and there was another part in here about leaders know their constituents' strengths better than they themselves know them, and empowering based on strengths model and trust working so much better than when work is dumped on people, because I've done both and I've seen the results of both, and definitely working to people's strengths and encouraging definitely works more. But to answer your question in terms of what do we do, what do we have in place that encourages appreciation? I start with a concept every day of a positive focus, like what are you proud of having accomplished before we get into sort of the things that you want to do. I don't know if that's really appreciation or positive focus, but it is celebrating the wins. It's
Mhm.
not quite as good as Ambika's process, which I did take notes on. It sounds great.
No, thanks for sharing that. I think even, again, just different ideas of how it, just positive, just focusing on the positive. I think appreciation is about focusing on the positive. And I think it can look different in different situations. Does anyone else have any thoughts or shares? Mohit, Hiba, Avni. And again, it doesn't have to necessarily be on the work front. It might be whatever area they feel like they're leading, which is sometimes.
Okay. Hi, Ricken. If I may share, I just got a contrarian view on this, and maybe this will open up a little discussion or debate. So I often find myself,
Mohit, can you just tilt the camera down a little bit so we're just kind of getting half your head. There you go.
oh, okay, sorry about that. Quite often when we're in our weekly meetings and things like that with salespeople, so recognition, our national sales manager, he likes to recognize a lot of people. And so I always am torn between recognizing enough recognition and too much recognition. So if we're recognizing people to do their day-to-day duties, is that so there's a level of appreciation, and then we can go above and beyond where instead of recognizing overachievement, we kind of recognize average achievement, and then you set the bar a little lower. So I just wanted to kind of talk to that, where you should be appreciative of your people, but where's that line, right? Where's that line where too much appreciation can be a hindrance to performance?
Ricken, can I share something
Please
on
go
that?
ahead.
Because of experience firsthand, that over appreciation is so it almost is like destructive.
Oh, we lost you, Ambika.
I think I've lost you all. You're all frozen on my screen. Can you guys hear?
We can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my signal. I'm just gonna repeat what I quickly said. Was I totally agree with Mohit, or not agree, but I love that point that he's raised, because I have experienced firsthand how over acknowledgement incorrectly, that's not data driven, is actually more destructive. And to give an example, at the end of every program, we have coaches reviews. And this was early last year, where I went on and I was just very full of acknowledgement for the specific coach for how they showed up. And I think that was the gist of 20 out of 30 minutes of that call. The call was 30 minutes, 20 minutes. It was like, how great you are, blah, blah. And then the final 30 minutes, we looked at the data, and the data said something completely different, which is they were a completely ineffective coach, right? And they were left puzzled. They were like, am I great or am I not great? Because you just told me, spend 20 minutes telling me. And what I got was my initial feedback was so subjective, and also perhaps a growth opportunity area for me, which was almost, I think, coming from a sorry guys, I have my little one who loves contributing towards conversations, so totally chiming in. But Mohit, I love that point, and I don't think we talk about over acknowledgement in a harmful way enough, so thank you for raising that.
Anybody else have any comments on this point?
I have a comment to add to what Mohit and Ambika just said, which is I've experienced the same thing wherein, you know, in an effort to motivate people, I try to highlight the positives and really give them positive feedback on what's going well. And to my detriment, sometimes minimized in the same process, kind of minimize what was not going so well, because I wanted to sort of buy their, let's just say, loyalty, or, you know, build them up a little bit, things like that. And I found that you have to be very, very careful with that, because depending on the personality, my experience was that they got a little bit too full of themselves in a way, and to Ambika's point, stopped performing and were not as open to feedback, you know, after that. And so I had to really kind of self-reflect and adapt my message, you know, to ensure that I was only focusing on specifics of what they did right, but, you know, really balancing it out with developmental opportunities. So I think that's kind of the tendency, is when you're giving appreciation or trying to accelerate or accentuate the positives, that in the same process, you might sort of shy away from, you know, development opportunities and what they're not doing right.
Yeah, that's a
So
really
Rick, and
also.
yeah, so Rick, and the solution I came up with is, or not the solution, it's what I found helpful is the better relationships that you have with the people that you recognize or even chastise, the more impactful both the acknowledgement and the recognition, as well as the chastisement, will have an impact. So, you know, we you know, what I loved about this book, you know, my first session I joined, 80% of leadership is relationships. And so if we truly take that to heart, and that's the guiding principle, then so Ambika, the better relationships we have with people, and so we're not just acknowledging superficially, like Rasa was saying, that's what I have to guard against, to know that, hey, am I being superficial here just to kind of create a culture or something like that, and not be deemed as a negative boss or anything like that. If we have a really intimate relationship where we can be honest, I found that to be way more effective than superficially acknowledging people.
I think, yeah, that's a really powerful point, because basically the appreciation will be, you know, in one sense, it'll also be grounded based on the relationship, and the constructive feedback will also be taken from a place where it's made from a place that really, if that relationship is strong, then it's seen from a point of view where it's for their betterment and upliftment rather than to bring them down. So yeah, I think that's a great point. And just going back to that fact of leadership being revolved around relationships, I was appreciating Ambika's point about just this area of like data driven. I have to often do, I lead kind of the medical education in our hospital for all the students and residents that come through. And so it has to involve doing a lot of evaluations. And I was appreciating the point that at least what we have to do, or what I try to do on a regular basis, is we have our point of view on how we see a particular individual and their performance, and trying to gather data from other physicians who have also worked from, you know, with the students, because we have a, you know, a particular point of view. I found to be really helpful to at least corroborate my perspective, and see, and you know, see if things are lining up. And then I think it's also important that there may, you know, there's always going to be differing points of views. And I think as Ambika was saying, kind of it being a little bit data driven. So obviously if there's consistency, that will go a long way in it being, I think, more realistic rather than just one person's opinion. Ronnie, it's good to see you.
Likewise, lovely to be back. I was traveling last week.
I just wanted to move on to the next session. Does someone want to read the next section, which is an impressive impression? Go ahead, Paul.
An impressive impression. A king who is honored by his subjects will naturally be respected by his foes and will be feared by them also. This is an important point. In many countries, I visit the king. If he gives me blessings, he sends word out to his people to honor our mission and give all assistance. Sometimes a king will call an assembly of important people and allow us to present our mission. Sometimes the kings are surrounded by dozens of sub-chiefs and constituents. In one place, the king's men were falling asleep during the gathering. In other places, the people were attentive and communication was strong. In each case, the people sent out a clear message about how much they honor their leader. If they want to know the quality of a leader, we examine the quality of his assistants. Similarly, when I notice how nicely people serve their leader, even if I don't know the particular leader, I receive an impression of his power to lead and enthuse his followers. When a leader expresses, his followers will reflect back into the community. Would you like me to keep going?
Yeah, please.
Be prepared for everything. Never trust the guardians of the city or fort implicitly. A good ruler is always prepared. He has alternate ideas if his original plan does not succeed. And if something goes wrong, he's prepared to deal with it. Because he is so protective and caring, he takes extra precaution in all areas. A king's men. Having performed his twilight devotions, let him, well armed, hear an inner apartment the doings of those who make secret reports of his spies. The spies should bring the king information about his subjects. If the king's duty to minimize the sinful activities committed in his kingdom, therefore it is important that he knows what his subjects are doing. Lord Rama, the incarnation of Krishna described in Ramayana, the ancient Indian epic, considered this duty so important that he disguised himself and entered even the Dobis's or laundrymen's village. In this way, he discovered what his citizens were thinking. A good leader should be aware of his area of activity and others as well. In this way, he can understand better the real needs of his dependents, so he can serve and protect them with full facility.
Perfect. We'll stop there. Any reflections from this section on impressive impression, where a king who is honored by his subjects will naturally be respected by his foes and will be feared by them also?
I like that if we want to know the quality of a leader, we can examine the quality of his assistants.
Yeah, it's kind of looking at the fruit off a tree, right?
Yeah.
And I think here, like this, what leader expresses, followers will reflect back to the community. I think from what would be interesting to hear from everyone is like in their day-to-day leadership, what priorities do they put forth as what they're putting out as their kind of topmost priorities to help the culture of their work setting. And if that hasn't been thought about, there's an opportunity to reflect on what they would like reflected back. Are they regularly putting it out there for the people that they lead to see? So two things that were coming to my mind, at least in my day-to-day as being a leader. One is when you work with different groups of people is, for me, it's being approachable. I think that's always something that I'm trying to come across, like, or give the sentiment I always want to give people is this area, like this being approachable as an individual, especially when it comes to sharing feedback. And one of the ways I would do that is just by having conversations with different people on how something we've done could be better. And using that as a tool for approachability. The second thing that is something that I always just try to keep at the fore is trying to just be very honest about potential limitations that I have in my work, and again, just trying to create that space for others to also be honest in whatever they're trying to do as well. So these are two things that regularly are something that I try to just keep as a fore as qualities that I'm trying to share with others. So hopefully they, gives them also the permission or hopefully the inspiration to do the same. Does anyone else have any qualities or attributes they'd like they're trying to put across in their areas of leadership on a regular basis? Okay. Then the next section here, all the king's men. One area that I wanted to just get into was, it says here a good leader should be aware of his area of activity and others as well. To me, this very much comes to the point of feedback, and in their workplace, how people collect honest feedback rather than, sometimes sometimes it just being for the sake of giving or collecting feedback, or just how they get a sense of how they feel like they get the pulse of what's going on in their respective work field. I just wanted, if anyone had any thoughts or comments on this, I think it would be good, something for all of us to learn from.
Rick, and if I can just back up just a 1 second, if that's okay.
Please.
To the previous. My only comment would be is, you asked the question of how we impart our culture into our teams or our group. And the answer is, for me, I have to be very, very focused on any decision I make, or actually, I should say every decision I make has an impact on our culture, right? So sometimes we look for concrete ways to create culture artificially. I'm not saying that's bad, because I think there's we need that. However, a true culture of an organization or a group is imparted by the decisions that we make as leaders and or collective decisions. So I guess my final point is the culture is created through the filter that we want our decisions to be made. And so that's really what sets the culture, and maybe not necessarily a model that we create, which can help organize a culture, but really a culture is established over a long haul by the decisions that we make and how we go about making those decisions. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so you're just saying that it's something that's not just done as a one-off. It's really over time, and it has to look consistent.
Right. Like, for example, like creating an avenue for people to provide feedback via survey. It's great infrastructure to be able to create that. However, what I want to say is that's not enough in itself. So the true culture will be created as we filter our decision-making through the lens that we want to create, right? So our people understand the decisions we make and why we make them, imparts more of a culture than creating avenues for people to provide either feedback or areas of appreciation, so forth and so on. So they're both important, is what I'm saying. And sometimes the former is not stressed enough, meaning the decision making and how those things are done. Is it?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Anybody else have any thoughts or reflections on this point of, again, having awareness of what is happening in their organization and this area of just collecting or having honest feedback that goes out? may be dependent on us.
If I can just get that right, Rikin. So I think what I'm getting from that point is, I guess in an organization, there was something there that said about like staying in your lane. So you knowing your remit, your area, and owning that, but also having an awareness of what else is going on within the organization, right? Rather than I'm going to go into all areas and I'll show you how it's done here, I'll show you how it's done there, but there should be an awareness of what's going on and how that feeds into the bigger picture. But again, like if I'm in charge of marketing, I'm in charge of marketing. And at the same time, I should really have an awareness of what's going on with finance and budgets. But that isn't my remit. It's not me to tell them how to run their department, you know, unless there is a request for help or contribution or something of that sort.
Yeah, I think this section really, or at least to me, it's getting at a section that we would put, or an area that we would have, you know, we have certain area of say and control, to be aware in those areas. That's what I gathered from this section. It would be an area where we're specifically responsible for the group of people that is in a particular section.
The part that gets me is the reference to spies. And I don't know
And
that
I
I
was just
quite understand the implications of that.
yeah, I was just going to ask the question, you know, this area, this notion of spies obviously has to do with a different time where I think, you know, back then spies, when people were protecting their land, spies have to do with, you know, trying to see if the, you know, obviously in the field of protection of one's land and people, to have people on the ground who are collecting information that they necessarily don't have access to about potentially things going wrong, things being planned. But I was just going to put out to others is in today's day and age, what does that translate for us in terms of what you know, what a spy, quote unquote, may look like in our, you know, in our work setting. To me, it speaks to the point that having good relationships at all levels of like an organization is really important. So at least in a hospital system, it would be, you know, from the person, you know, our superiors who work above us, all the way down to even the people that potentially may get taken for granted, like the, you know, the people that, you know, the janitors, the people that clean, that obviously do a very important task in the work, you know, in the work setting, but don't necessarily always get maybe asked their opinion. So I was just in my mind, I was, you know, seeing like, how does that translate? And I was looking at the importance of just having, you know, feeling connected or having some sort of acknowledgement and work and relationship with people in all levels of the organization.
I think the relationship component of it is really, really important. But when I took a look at spies, I was thinking more about dysfunctional situations where there is conflict, to have people on the other side of the conflict that you have a good relationship with that can tell you what that is. Or another type of spy might be a competitive analysis of your competitive landscape. So to understand who your enemies are and what they're up to in terms of a competitive commercial environment is definitely good to have. It's not something I do, but I probably should. So I don't know if that ties in at all.
Yeah, I guess you're just talking about, I mean, it goes back to the point of what we were talking about, where we should, you know, what are we learning from our competitors, right? And how if there ever an opportunity where not only where we can learn, but is there an opportunity for even collaboration, right? So, but I mean, your point is well taken about just seeing them as a potential spy, quote unquote.
I
Does
had
anyone
a
else have
point
anything to
add.
share on this again, in this area of collecting.
Yes, I had a point to add in terms of spies in the modern application, especially in a team. So when I read that, just to add to Paul's feedback, competitive analysis, all that kind of stuff. But I was also looking at it more practically speaking. And for me, that means that you have trusted individuals, whether it be on your team or in the organization, that are willing to give you the inside scoop or the real, behind the scenes, or give you the pulse of what's going on. Like, sometimes you might have a view of what's going on that's, let's just say rosy, and, you only see the good, but then, they understand what's going on behind the scenes, and, people are talking, and you kind of get the chatter, and you are a bit better able to understand the issues that way. So that's kind of what I took it as.
And Rick, and if I can add,
Please.
so absolutely. So the larger the organization, the more spies you need. And I take this very literally. Actually, it's very applicable to me. Because when you have a large organization, you're going to have dysfunction, as Paul put it, but it's actually just normal business culture. There's going to be factions which support your agenda, and then there's factions that don't support your agenda. And one of the jobs as a leader is to understand the factions that do not. So then you can create a consortium, if you will, or whatever actions and decisions that need to be taken, understanding exactly who's supporting you, what influence they have. So it's a very political type of thing. And it's referring to, like, the old kings and queens courts in the European, back in the monarchy days, right? And even in India, right? So these courts, they were really run by factions of nobles who, depending on a certain big issue, you need to understand where they're going to land in terms of their vote and what they're going to support. So it's very, very important to have literal spies trying to figure out where they're going to land. So in a corporate culture type of environment, the bigger the organization, it's almost the exact same thing. Where you need to understand where people stand on big issues like, hey, should we buy this company or not? Should we implement this program or not? And so if you have that information, it's invaluable for you to understand, hey, how do I position myself to combat that? Or, hey, you know what, this is a losing battle. I better back off. So I literally take this literally, the spying thing.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think for you, Mohit, who's in a larger organization, I think it becomes even more relevant the larger an organization becomes to have as many people on the ground as you can to collect feedback from. And obviously, we're not always going to maybe take everything into consideration, or sorry, we're not going to use everything to guide what we decide, but it's good to know. Hiba?
Yes, I wanted just to add a point. Usually for, the insiders that you call them like somehow spy inside, sometimes, mainly leaders, when they wanted to make any changement of any regulation or add anything, usually they try to test the ground by somehow giving like information to others just to check if they are able for these changes or for these new ideas. And they they give for others like confidential information. Usually it's not confidential, but it's just they were trying to test the ground, and they test how it's their feedback, and they go back to the leader, and accordingly sometimes some leader, if they want to take very big decisions accordingly, they test how is the ground, and they say we will go with this direction or with that direction. I don't know if you agree or if I formulated well my comment.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. It's definitely a good one in terms of how we can approach this.
Yes,
just
and you.
to-
I'm
Go
sorry
ahead.
for interrupting. is one, and two, usually if they are taking a decision, sometimes leader or big companies, they take some decisions. But they need, for example, they say starting from that date, we will apply it. But before they try to like infiltrate it little by little. So when this time will arrive, and this is very smart, people are used first because they don't want to make a big shock of some big decisions that usually employees are not happy to have them. So they infiltrated little by little, and in their mind, they know that at that time, for example, after 4-6 months, it will be applied on everyone. So it's like a small filtration indirectly. There is a different methodology of applying these stuff as well.
Yeah, it's a good point, Hiba, about just trying to get the principle or the change out to the organization in an informal way, and so that there's some time for people to adjust before the kind of the hard line is put down. Great.
And same in different countries as well, you know, mainly for dictatorial countries. I don't want to talk more about it, but this is how they do, you know. So people are used later on to the new regulation or the new implementation. It's the same, like, you know, you're running a country or you're running a big company. It's somehow very similar.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Run a company, run a country. I just wanted to move on to the next section. We'll skip the be directly involved. I think we've talked a lot about that. But this understanding the principle of self-interest, if someone wants to read that, this is a really, I think, powerful point.
Yeah, I can read it if you want.
Please.
Okay. Understanding the principle of self-interest. Self-interest is the most powerful fact in everyone's life. No one is dear to another unless there is gain involved. Leaders understand that self-interest is a powerful motivating force. If leaders can enthuse others by speaking to their own self-interests, or if they can even be aware that people are motivated by personal desires, there will be less likelihood of failure. And he's gone.
Sorry about that. Ed was just, the clocks had changed in the UK. So I was just trying to see where he was. And then he was just telling me that the time is still earlier for them because of the change. Avni, did you get to the end of this section?
I did. I know, as in of that section, understanding the principles of self-interest. Yes. You want me to read on?
Yeah, please.
Okay, appropriate punishment. Know how to use the power of punishment and do not hesitate to use them on miscreants. People are often led by chastisement. Know then the science of chastisement. Is that right? In leadership, the judicious use of punishment is important. Excessive punishment leads to chaos, but if a leader fails to address the faults of those under him, he will simply help to reinforce those faults, and the society will become degraded. It is often difficult, however, to achieve the proper balance.
Just wanted to hear from everyone these 2 points on, or at least the first point on self-interest. I guess, how does that land with everyone in terms it seems, I mean, to me, fairly self-explanatory. But when I read this, just kind of what's in this box here, no one is dear to another unless gain is involved.
Hey, Rick, if I may add,
Please.
let's not overthink it. That's a full stop. As leaders, the number one and most important thing is self-interest. So if all your motivational tactics about the company and all these things aren't working, just go right to what's interested for them, whether it's compensation, probably number one, if they're working for you, or other self-interest, promotion of some sort, and focus in on that. And you're more likely to solve your problem than trying to motivate by some altruistic perspective.
Yeah,
It's
I was
the
just thinking
what's
it brought up the point of just how important we have to acknowledge selfishness in the process, right? And then this point
Just
here
to-
on.
sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Just to answer Mohit on that, in terms of sometimes as leaders, we may assume what we feel that their ulterior motive is or what they require. When in fact, when we dig deeper, it may not be, for example, let's say monetary. It may not be monetary. It could be something else. So it's always good to just basically dig a little bit deeper to see really what is that they are missing and what is their motivation to do better. So yeah, I just that, because often we assume all the time that yeah, I think it's because they need more money or they need a promotion or something like that. But actually, the essence could be something totally different. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, thanks, Avni, for that. Just pointing out that sometimes, as Mohit said, it is potentially financial, but trying to dig into what that may be, I think is important.
Yeah, and I actually find it's often not financial. It could be like a lack of appreciation. It could be better work-life balance. I think the trick is knowing that, what's important to them and giving it to them is important. But I think you actually have to know the person and ask the questions to get there, to Avni's point, I think.
Mhm. I find oftentimes the leaders that I've worked with, they've made an assumption that everyone is probably driven by something or potentially what they're driven by, which is a lot of times finances. But when they find that they're not getting the responses from people, it's usually often because the question hasn't been asked or they haven't, really gotten to know their constituents well enough in terms of what's motivating them. So again, just as you were saying, go ahead.
It could also be lack of confidence. A lot of people lack confidence in a lot of areas. So I don't know, it's just a thought.
Confidence as a leader?
No, as in when a leader wants to try and find out, what's the motivation or personal desires of their team. Sometimes when someone is not performing, it's maybe not that they're not dissatisfied. It could be because they lack confidence.
I was just going to add, so, coming from a, sales background and a sales leadership background, you have, a really keen understanding of this point because, the value that you create is based on understanding people's needs first, and then responding to those needs appropriately and finding the best, way to respond and adjust accordingly. So, to add to Mohit's point, self-interest, it could be, there's so many reasons, right? There could be so many areas of self-interest, but the idea is to seek to understand first and ask the right questions. So in sales, the sales process is you always start by asking questions. You get the other person to talk and reveal what their motivations are first. And then only when you understand those motivations are you able to address every single one of their, needs effectively and succinctly. So, but the premise, always starts with the fact that what's in it for them. And when you have a really good understanding of that, then everything kind of, flows from there.
Yeah, really good point. Thanks, Rasa. again, those right questions are really important. And as you were just saying, acting based on creating that value based on your understanding, which means usually we have to listen first as leaders. Perfect. This area on this section here on punishment, I guess to me, I just wanted to hear from those in leadership positions how they balance, this probably tension that comes up of providing slack to the people we lead versus kind of reining people in and having boundaries or drawing the line where some sort of consequence is put in place. How people kind of toe the line between these two things, because as the book was initially saying earlier on, that for those that we're leading, there has to be a certain level of respect that is there for the constituents to their leader to follow, but then being too harsh is also not, will also push people away. So to me, it kind of also overlapped with this in this area of also having consequences, or how this book puts it as punishment, how people have navigated the tension between this. If people have any thoughts or reflections.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that we, the kind of punishment or consequences is something definitely needed as part of the culture or the leadership culture, because the absence of it also communicates something, not just to those that don't adhere to something and then have or don't have consequences. It communicates to those that are and have been adhering, but they observe that nothing is happening to those that don't. So it sends a mixed signal in the culture. So an example is if we work with certain leaders or contractors, or there's an agreement in place. We've had this in the past in our organization. We work with a large body of coaches, and they have to show up on a leadership retreat, which is an agreement. They commit to show up, 4 weekends in a year. If they don't show up on that weekend because something happened, I didn't have a cat sitter or whatever it was, they didn't put what they need to put in place, and they let us know in 24 hours while we've, prepared to have them there. And then there isn't a consequence for the person not showing up. It sends a mixed signal to those that do show up, those that are doing it by design. And so I think there does need to be some kind of consequence. And of course, that consequence doesn't have to be harmful, abusive, disempowering. It's just creating a state and conversation of workability and unworkability, right? And the consequence might mean, termination of somebody's agreement or role, or them having to put something else in place over and above to make up for what was missed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I guess, Ronnie, in your organization, are the consequences already what I'm trying to say is there education on what the consequences are beforehand?
So the reason I say this wasn't put in place when some people signed up initially. When initially we started to grow it, the agreement to coach, to train, or call it crewing or assisting or seva, was not in place at the point of the initial first couple batches of people joining. And then you got this hybrid where later on we make that as an agreement, but we couldn't reinforce it to those that joined before. And then you have to roll that out in phases, or at the end of somebody's initial agreement, have them recommit or sign to the new terms of the coaching agreement. But yes, where it wasn't communicated, and then you want to do something that create a consequence or some punishment, that didn't work. That was working. We would be at a loss of power in that conversation. And we can't assume it unless we've gotten them to agree to it. Did you get me, Rikin?
Sorry, my side froze a little bit. And I'm not sure if it
All
was
right.
just my side or if it was yours.
I heard all of it, Ronnie. I think that you made some good points in terms of clear agreements at the beginning of a relationship are important. And we actually have our agreements re-signed anytime there's a material shift in role with the updated template, just so that the agreements always stay fresh. But in terms of holding people accountable, I think it comes down also to that empathetic parental role, right? To hold people accountable with anger is a really bad idea. To hold people accountable with care for the person's well-being is I think a very important part of holding people accountable and maintaining a good culture. So that's I think the big aha moment. And in terms of escalations, we do go through the escalation process all the way through to termination if we need to.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else have
Awesome.
any comments to share on this section of setting consequences, or how?
I think Mohit might be speaking, but I don't know. Okay.
Please, Mohit.
I was appreciating your
Yeah. All right, if no one else has anything to share, we can just move to the next section, environmental concerns. Does someone want to read? Mohit, why don't you read?
Okay. Environmental concerns. Pay attention to the state of the kingdom. Old and ramshackle surroundings are a sign of disregard. Renovate to win good opinion. When things are neat, clean, organized, a message is sent out that something important is happening. Organized surroundings tell people that there is structure to the project, as well as order and vision. In general, people do not like to be part of something that seems inherently unsuccessful. Most people prefer to participate in the projects that appear progressive. When people feel that they are involved in something successful, it is easier for them to commit themselves to working for greater success. That is human nature. If the surroundings say failure, 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 even if we try to assure people that their project will be a success, the environment will speak louder than our words. The surroundings represent the present state of affairs, and most people judge by what is happening in the present, not by what could happen in the future. Cleanliness and order are also important because we want to remember that everything belongs to God. Order can be used to glorify God because it can attract people to serve him. That initial attraction will put them in a position to hear higher philosophy. If we tell people we have higher philosophy, but we live at a low standard, they will not be attracted.
Thank you. Do you want to read the next section?
Sure. Parental mood revisited. People should live in freedom and happiness as they do in their father's house. Again, Bishmadev mentions the parental mood. The very essence of the king's role is to protect the people and their happiness. This point is mentioned again and again in scripture. Seeing to the happiness of others is one of the first duties of the king. It is not easy to secure people's happiness. You must use diverse methods, skills, cleverness, and truth. All these are important. Sometimes we unfortunately do not have good relations with our leaders or fathers. If we think our father to be a good person and maintain a good relationship with him, we will feel comfortable in our father's house. We will feel protected, comfortable, and secure. Leaders should help their dependents feel similarly protected as they are in their father's house. If within the house they have freedom, protection, security, they will feel appreciated and loved.
Great. And this next section on good association, does someone else want to read?
I can read.
Please, Christina.
Hello. Good association, surrounding yourself with the people of like nature who have noble qualities. The only difference between the king and the king's officer is the white umbrellas signifying a higher office. What best leaders are surrounded by powerful people, and this is because they value strength. If leaders want to accomplish great things, they need people around them who are capable of helping them. Good leaders also have the ability to empower others to do things beyond their imagined capacity. Good leaders want to help others become good leaders too. A good leader wants to be surrounded by a variety of people with diverse form of intelligence, insight, and creativity. In this way, they can make their mission strong. Visionary leader does not mean that everyone must have the exact same vision of how the mission should be accomplished. What it does mean is that they should all be dedicated to the mission in general. People may have different conceptions about the vision that cannot be avoided. They should, however, all agree on the goal.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Rikin, could I just ask Christina just to repeat the bit about the how, but being agreed on common goal? I think it's just the last two sentences.
People may have different conceptions about the vision that cannot be avoided. They should, however, all agree on the goal.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
So this, just going back to the section on environmental concerns, to me, it was just bringing out this point on how aesthetics is basically an entry point for people to buy into a particular organization or project. And we can see that a lot of times, or at least what I see now more and more, is that there's a lot more emphasis put on aesthetics. But then when you get into the organization itself, there's a certain level of, I mean, aesthetics are there to allure people in, but that once people get on the inside, they realize that in one sense, it was kind of like a show, and that the aesthetics aren't always of higher quality when it comes to the internal dealings of a company. So to me, I was also just reflecting on this section with environment, not just the environment of what things look like, where it be clean and organized and neat, but also just how I think as leaders, we should always be putting a lot of emphasis on just the environment, also including good relationships that we always come back to. As probably, I see a lot of organizations that also may not have the same aesthetics, but they have the culture and the mood, and the relationships are so strong and positive that I think it can be, the relationships can in fact override that kind of that sense of aesthetics. Any other thoughts or reflections on this section? It's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would add to that from the aesthetic standpoint, in a digital world where we are communicating digitally, like your digital platforms have to also occur that way. And we find in the world of well-being and coaching, one of the most aesthetically impactful images, unfortunately or fortunately, is before and after photos, right? Where people think, oh, you guys are a weight loss program, or you guys are a six-pack diet. Like they see those images. When they get in the program, they get a deeper sense of the philosophy, the mind-body connection, relationships, aligning with your authentic nature, and they realize, oh, actually, you guys are not a weight loss program. You're way more than that. But there is a certain occurring or appearance we have to attract people. So they come for the weight loss, kind of give them what they need, and then you give them what they want, right? I mean, give them what they want and then give them what they really need, right? And so, but that's the thing we have to regularly, even from appearance on Zoom calls to our slides to, we don't have a physical building that people walk into. So I think I'll just share or offer that one additional way. that applies is how we also communicate structurally who we are as an entity by where we show up, even if it's in digital spaces.
Yeah, and you can see so much of that aesthetics being emphasized. Let's say if you look at someone's Instagram page, right? And how things are done in a way, and you can very much easily tell that things are done intentionally to form a certain specific pattern, a certain exactly what you're saying to be able to draw people in. But I also appreciate that point you were saying is, we have to appeal at a certain level to bring in the mass, but then obviously people who are coming for what we really want to offer will be the ones that stay, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then this section here, I mean, the parental mood we've talked about a few times, but this area on good association, surrounding yourself. I always think about this saying that Robin Sharma gave us. He said, if you tell me who the 5 closest people are in your life, I'll tell you who you'll become. And to me, I've always just taken that to heart, and something that I'm always just trying to think about is, who this good association is. But one of the things that I wanted to put out there is that how do people deal with, in our organization, in our personal life, sometimes we have people that may not be that positive association that, we would necessarily choose, but, they've come to us by, you can say providence, on how we, I guess, how our approach is in those situations, how we deal, either one balance, but how we also deal with the association or the company that's not always going to be encouraging or positive for us. Because the reality is that we can't always, potentially choose in every situation who that good company is. Any reflections on just how people go about dealing with, basically, it's the question on dealing with people that may not be so positive or potentially even bring negativity to our environment. I'm sure we've all felt that in some capacity in either our work or personal life.
Provides personal growth.
So seeing it as an opportunity, right?
Yes, because I think being centered to who you are in the presence of negativity and not getting triggered by it is a skill. And if we can just not make it a skill and make it part of the DNA, that I think is the goal. Because we shouldn't really be affected by what's around us, but we are, because we're humans with the emotional contagion. So when we're around negative people, if we can still protect ourselves and just let them flow the way they want to while we continue flowing the way we are, I think is the goal, but it's not easily achieved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure people have different, it looks different for different people, but one of the things that I try to do on a daily basis is I always explain to others that, when we have some sort of nourishment or practice for ourselves, particularly if we can do it, first thing in the morning when the elements have, we've been hit less by the elements, that I see it as very much you would never go into a situation having not prepared, let's say even like a test or an exam, having not studied. So going out in the world, I also feel as if we have some sort of daily practice, whether it be, for some people it's exercise, some people it's meditation, some people it's reading or journaling, but having what I call putting on the armor at the beginning of the day, before we go out into the world, to me has probably, I'd say, single-handedly what I do as a practical point to help mitigate what I know for sure is a lot of challenge and stress, especially in the work environment that I'm in, where you're basically just, you're there just to always solve problems and take on people's burdens. And so this is this is something that I do for myself every day. But I will say that, and I will definitely also comment that it's very, for me, when it's done over a period of time, you actually notice within yourself when the proper measures have not been taken to walk into a particular situation, how more you can be affected than the times when you have tried to best equip yourself. Anybody else on how they're dealing with this idea of maybe not positive association or potential negativity that's inevitably coming up?
I would just say a recent decision we've had to make, what we call branding by association, is so when we organize treks, on the treks we get other people come who are coaches or leaders or speakers for some other types of offerings, right? Laughter, meditation, singing, musicals, art classes, and so on. So from time to time within the community, we'll promote or big up some of those people and say, let's organize a trial class or a FitBanker event where we go and trial out that concept. So if it's aligned with well-being, if it's aligned with fitness, we tend to promote those more. And one recently we had to think about, and we didn't go ahead, or have chosen now not to go ahead with, is it was a musical night. It's like a Bollywood night where there's going to be dance and performances, but it's also happening at night. It's like a club, and it's going to be loads of alcohol. And we don't, it's not forbidden alcohol per se. We don't enforce that view on people. It's for them to choose, but we might smear our brand by making that choice. We might occur as, here you're on your program, you tell people to avoid alcohol for 5 weeks and cut this and cut that, but there's our banner and billboard at an event that's offering all the forbidden foods and drink. And you have to kind of make that question there around, do we want to be formally associated? We could go as an individual there, support their event, and obviously we choose responsibly what we eat and drink and how we behave, but do we want the corporate name there? Do we want the banner there, right? And maybe not, right? Maybe that will disfavor what it is you stand for.
Yeah, it's a really great point on just really being aware of how the brand looks to to a wider group of people, especially when you have clear values in place. So it's a really good opportunity to to reflect on what you guys stand for, and then make that, by not being present, you also send a message, right? I mean, meaning like the brand, right? So
yeah.
And then ultimately, we're always wanting to surround ourselves around the people that, want to change the most. So hopefully in kind of, that repetition of putting yourself out there in a certain way, people are only coming to you for a very specific purpose. And it's what you ultimately want to give out too. So that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that, Ronnie. Mohit?
I have a small point to add. To me, association, especially as it regards to managing a team, can also mean that it only takes one bad apple, so to speak, on your team to, let's just say, create waves throughout the rest of the team and sort of ruin the culture, right? So you could have, somebody on the team that's constantly, refusing or negating authority, or talking badly about decisions, or disagreeing publicly with decisions, or not being constructive, and trying to influence others in that way, and that can bring the whole morale of the team down. I've experienced this numerous times where obviously going through the mechanisms of trying to work with somebody to, to fix behavior or improve behavior. Everything wasn't working out. And I just found that, letting go of a person, the team's dynamics, the culture, the mood, everything just like from one day to another improved. So just wanted to relate that to association as well.
Yeah, this idea of one apple can kind of ruin the rest of the batch is also a really important thing to keep on top of, Rasa, as you were saying. In terms of good association, especially when it comes to leaders and people were organizing, one point that I wanted to just bring up is just being able to understand, because I think many of us may make mistakes, but I think always trying to understand the intention or the motive, I think is really important when we try to discriminate and discern, because the external, how people come across externally sometimes is different than, or sometimes it's just due to unawareness. So I think understanding people's intention and motive when we're discriminating also is really important in this regard as well. Any other final thoughts on this? So I know, I just wanted to let everyone know that because there was a time change, that Ed is running a little bit behind. I think he said he was still planning on coming. But we have a choice right now. We could close off the call. We could just wait for him to join, because basically what we're going to be doing is an activity. But I just wanted to put it out there to the group to see what people had time for.
Yeah, no, I unfortunately, Rick, have to leave.
No problem.
Sure.
Yeah, I want to find Rick, what will the timings be going forward, because this time works better for me.
So meaning
just the
like what
time.
time is it? I guess what time is it? Because our clocks haven't changed.
So
What time?
basically, yeah, UK moved their clocks 1 hour back, right? So we're in Zambia now. We're 2 hours ahead of the UK, but today this call started 1 hour ahead of the UK, which worked better for me.
Okay, so I'm just trying to understand. Like we're gonna,
but it may not. But we need to see if that works for Ed, right?
yeah, sure. So you're saying basically having started when we started, which was earlier, would have been earlier better for you, right?
No, so for the Americans, the time you started today works perfect for me. But if you are going to go back to what it was for UK, you will have to start an hour later.
Right. Well, yeah.
If that doesn't work for the Americans, then we need to find a way that it works for both Ed and the Americans.
Understood. Ed,
So
we
that's
were
Ed.
We were just talking.
We were manifesting you.
Timing,
We were
yes.
manifesting you, Ed.
I'm so sorry. I know that because in London it's just after 12:30, but I know that there was a time because we had our clocks go back very recently. So yeah, how's it? Do people have to leave now? What's the situation?
We were just trying to get that sense if people had to leave. I knew when you were to come, we would probably get into an activity. We've been just going through different sections and discussing the different sections we progressed to. We were just finishing off on this section called Good Association.
Yes, I'm familiar.
And particularly what we were just discussing now is how do we deal with maybe negative or not so positive association on our team?
Great question.
And Ronnie was just relaying that in his, they had to basically cut an opportunity with being represented at a certain event because it went against their values and they didn't want their company to be tied to a particular set of values where potentially they were serving alcohol and different things that their company said, when people come to them, they said, these are things that we have to let go of, right?
Wow, and that's powerful because I know Ronnie's got a lot of integrity, strength of character. I remember that. It's great to see you. But so, what was the decision on timing? Would you prefer? What works for you?
Ed, I think because most of North America, their clocks haven't changed, but for UK and for us, rest of the world, it's become an hour earlier.
Yes.
And now already a couple have had to drop, but I think Paul has to go as well.
Okay.
The question, Ed, for you is going forward. Does it work for you to start an hour earlier, UK time?
It will be I can do an hour earlier next week, definitely. And I'm wondering, will that be enough time? Will everyone else's clocks then synchronize? Because I know that in the US, aren't the times changing soon?
This Sunday.
Yeah, this
Sunday.
Sunday. Yeah, so I can do, so
Oh.
if you want this Friday coming, I think everyone's going to catch up anyway, isn't it? Is that not the case?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll
so
see 5 hours next week because we changed this week. So
so we should be fine actually, no matter what next week. So but what should we do for this session? Should we close now because people need to go, or I've got some exercise, but it will require people to be present because I think you'll like this, but it'll be quite substantial. So maybe we should, if this is the case and people need to go, I think we should wait till next week and then do it, because I'll just give you a heads up and I'm going to send you a document in that case. I was going to get you to I was just going to show it to you. But what I'll do is if we've got more time, I'm going to create a document for you and we're going to actually do a particular activity where we're going to look specifically at the team members and do an analysis. We could do it without me giving a document, but if there's time, I'll add an extra level to the practice. Okay, in that case, what we may have to do, because I think people are going to have to go, let's carry on next week. But next week next week I can start at 12. So if you even want to start earlier next week, because next Friday I'm off. So I can be as flexible as you want, and I can start from the beginning and we can do something a bit more in depth.
perfect. We'll have you start from the beginning then.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, sorry about this. It would be great to spend more time with you, but yeah, next week.
All right.